All right. Welcome back to another session of Sister for Sister Story Time with your favorite sister, Shia Baya. So, I am back with a part two of Final Destination Bloodlines. Yesterday, we ended off on the plains of Moab, I believe. We're going to continue with that. I'm sorry, let me get my scattered brain together. Okay, so I just want to touch on exactly what it's supposed to happen in the end times according to Revelations. And then we will go back into the land of these accursed peoples or so called extended family. Okay, so what are the 7 last plagues of Revelation? This is lifehopeandtruth.com. Says that Revelation speaks of 7 last plagues that will come upon the earth at the end of this present age. What are these plagues and why will God send them? And there were noises and thunderings and lightnings, and there was a great earthquake, such a mighty and great earthquake as had not occurred since men were on the earth. Revelation 16:18. The end time prophetic events recorded in the book of Revelation that will occur before and at the time of Christ's return to earth are outlined by 7 seals, 7 trumpet plagues, and the 7 last plagues. The first 4 seals represent trends and plagues that have been continuing and intensifying through the years to our day. All of the events from the 5th seal through the 7 last plagues will occur in the final 3.5 years before Christ's return. After all these plagues in Revelation, Jesus Christ will return to save humanity from self-destruction. Finally, the punishments will produce repentance, and people will turn to our Savior and King, Jesus Christ. Will bring peace, blessings, and a perfect government. How the 7 seals in Revelation are related to the 7 last plagues. The first 5 seals depict consequences for mankind's sinful behaviors and Satan's wrath toward the people of God and mankind in general. The 6th seal announces the soon-to-come wrath of God. The 7th seal includes the wrath of God, which will be dispensed via 7 trumpet plagues and then 7 last plagues. The 7 last plagues completing the wrath of God. These 7 plagues complete the wrath of God, as John wrote, "Then I saw another sign in heaven, great and marvelous, 7 angels having the 7 last plagues, for in them the wrath of God is complete." The 7 last plagues in Revelation are: the first plague, the contents of the first bowl will cause painful sores upon those who had the mark of the beast and those who worshipped his image. It appears these painful open sores will be caused by some sort of skin disease or infection. The second plague, when this bowl is poured out, the sea will become blood and cause all life in it to die. The death of saltwater marine life will destroy a major food source for millions of people. The third plague. After the third angel pours out its bowl, the rivers and springs of water will become blood. This plague will destroy freshwater fish, even further impacting the food supply for millions of people. The fourth bowl will cause the sun to become so hot as to scorch men with fire. Definitely was hot in Mississippi this past weekend. Uh, the fifth plague, this punishment will bring darkness, pains, and sores. The sixth plague, the bowl containing this plague will be poured out on the Euphrates River, causing it to dry up and make land travel easier for the armies of the kings of the earth and of the whole world to assemble at Armageddon, the area of Megiddo, which is approximately 18 miles or 30 kilometers southeast of the modern city of Haifa or Haifa. From this location, the assembled armies will then advance toward Jerusalem for a final battle against Jesus Christ. This final plague will consist of noises and thunderings and lightnings and such a mighty and great earthquake as had not occurred since men were on the earth. Babylon, a powerful false religion, will fall, and there will be a devastating hail with hailstones weighing up to a talent or approximately 100 pounds. 1:44 on the clock. The last plagues of Revelation, also called the bowls of wrath. Sounds like a Super Bowl. Revelation 15:7 describes these seven last plagues as golden bowls full of the wrath of God to be poured out upon the earth. Some translations of the Bible, such as the King James Version and Young's literal translation, use the word vial instead of bowl in this passage and in Revelation 16:1. Albert Barnes, in his notes on the Bible, states the word used here, phial or phiali, means properly a bowl or goblet, having more breadth than depth. Our word vial, though derived from this, means a rather thin, long bottle of glass, used particularly by apothecaries and druggists. The word would be better rendered by bowl or goblet, and probably the representation here was of such bowls as were used in the temple service. The allusion seems to a drinking cup or goblet filled with poison and given to persons to drink, an allusion drawn from one of the methods of punishment in ancient times. So these bowls or vials are imagery God uses to represent the seven last punishments that he will pour out on a sinful humanity. Why does a merciful God allow these plagues on mankind? Notice mankind's response to the seven seals and seven trumpet plagues that will precede these last bowls of punishment. In spite of the severity of the pain and suffering that will be inflicted upon earth's inhabitants by the seals and trumpets, humanity will still refuse to repent of its sins. Reviewing what will have previously occurred during the seals and trumpets, we note that, in addition to grievous suffering, many people will lose their lives through the first four seals, which are also called the four horsemen of the apocalypse. Many more will die during the third trumpet plague, and then a third of the remaining population will die through the sixth trumpet plague. Deceived by Satan the devil through an end-time political and religious power called the beast, humanity will continue to defy and blaspheme God even as the seven last plagues are poured out. Sounds like the beast be east. In spite of these truly apocalyptic horrors, mankind will continue to reject God. They will refuse to worship or obey the Almighty, eternal, sovereign God. Deceived by Satan the devil in Revelation 12 and 9, through an end-time political and religious power called the beast, humanity will continue to defy and blaspheme God even as the 7 last plagues are poured out. As the first of the 7 last plagues is poured out, we are told that it will come upon the men who had the mark of the beast and those who worshipped his image. Note also that the 5th plague repeats that it will be poured out on the throne of the beast and his kingdom. Being part of the end-time political and religious system called the beast will have serious consequences. How do the 7 last plagues parallel other plagues in the Bible? There are 2 interesting historical parallels to the 7 last plagues. First, these 7 last plagues are typed by some of the punishments God brought upon the nation of Egypt in order to free the ancient Israelites from slavery. In the 10 plagues preceding the Exodus, water was turned to blood, people had painful sores, and the Egyptians experienced darkness for 3 days. There are obvious similarities to these punishments in the 7 last plagues. Note the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 5th plagues above. And just as Pharaoh hardened his heart toward God and his plan, so will the people who experience the 7 last plagues harden their hearts against God. It is also interesting to note that in Revelation 15, which introduces the 7 last plagues, we find God's faithful people singing the Song of Moses, a song composed by Moses after God had brought 10 plagues upon the Egyptians and delivered Israel. Second, the 7 last plagues of Revelation 15 and 16 have similarities to the 7 trumpet plagues, but with increased intensity. Note that the first 4 trumpets cause a third of the trees to be burned up, a third of the sea to become blood, a third of the creatures in the sea to die, a third of fresh water to become poisonous, and the light of the sun, moon, and stars to be diminished by a third. The 7 last plagues will cause all waters, both in the sea and fresh, to become blood, all life in the sea to die, and more darkness. God sends the plagues so that all mankind will turn to him. Some people have the mistaken idea that God is harsh and cruel, delighting in making people suffer. But this is most definitely not the reason God will bring these 7 last plagues upon mankind. As our loving Father, God always administers punishment to encourage us to turn from sinful conduct to obedience to his holy and beneficial laws so we can be blessed. Conveying this principle to ancient Israel, God told the prophet Ezekiel, "Say to them, as I live, says the Lord God, I have no pleasure in the death of the wicked, but that the wicked turn from his way and live. Turn from your evil ways. For why should you die, O house of Israel?" This principle that God explained to ancient Israel is true for all people, not just Israelites. God loves everyone, John 3:16, and desires all men to be saved and to come to the knowledge of the truth. The book of Revelation's prophecies about the 7 last plagues are terrifying and show there will be massive suffering and destruction around the world in the end times. This will be necessary for God to deal with a sinful and rebellious world. But the good news is this will be a temporary period of time. Afterward, Jesus Christ will return to stop the sufferings of the end time, deal with mankind's sins directly, and begin ruling the world with a rod of iron and righteousness, of course. This will result in 1,000 years of peace and prosperity. Okay, so what I want to talk about is the correlation of Egypt with the Moabites and Moabites, Ammonites, and Edom. Edom, let's see, Moab and Egyptian trade. Okay, so there were trade connections between Moab and ancient Egypt. Moab's strategic location along the King's Highway, a vital trade route, facilitated this interaction. Here's how Moab and Egypt interacted through trade. Geographic advantage. Moab's position on the King's Highway, which linked Egypt, Mesopotamia, Syria, and Anatolia, made it a key player in regional trade. This trade route provided Moabites with considerable revenue. Egyptian involvement. During the New Kingdom period, Bronze Age Moab was under Egyptian control, suggesting some level of direct administration or influence. This control naturally led to cultural exchange and likely facilitated trade between the two regions. Archaeological evidence. Egyptian control over trade routes in the Levant is supported by archaeological finds like the inscription of King Ramses III in Wadi Rum, which is the first direct evidence of Egyptian influence reaching that far into Jordan. The presence of Moab on a statue erected by Ramses II at Luxor further supports the connection. Purpose of Egyptian presence. Egypt might have established border fortresses in Moab to protect its trade routes, including the King's Highway, and secure the Sinai region. These fortresses also offered protection to Moab and facilitated trade. Nature of the trade. While not always explicitly stated, the trade route suggests goods like those found in other Levant Egypt trade. Timber from Byblos, luxury items like frankincense and spices could have been part of the exchange alongside goods potentially sourced from Moab, specifically limestone and salt. In conclusion, the location of Moab on the King's Highway, coupled with Egypt's documented control and presence in the Levant, strongly suggests significant trade interactions between the two entities, particularly during the Bronze Age. Now, let's see where the largest amounts of limestone and salt come from in North America. So, the world's largest limestone quarry by area, which is also considered the largest in North America, is located in Rogers City, Michigan. It's known as the Calcite Quarry and is operated by Carmeuse Lime and Stone. The quarry spans 8,024 acres and is over 4 miles long and 1.5 miles wide. Now there's that. Again, that's the world's largest limestone quarry. And Now let's see the salt. Largest salt mine in the U.S. Okay. And now the American Rock Salt Company's mine in Hampton Corners, New York, is the largest salt mine in the United States, according to the United Steelworkers. It is the first new salt mine built in the U.S. in over 50 years and can produce up to 20,000 tons of rock salt daily. According to their official website, the mine plays a crucial role in supplying road salt to the northeastern United States, particularly during the winter months. Okay. So let's see what would be King's Highway in the US. So according to Google, King's Highway would be Charleston to Boston. The King's Highway was a roughly 1,300-mile, 2,100-kilometer road laid out from 1650 to 1735 in the American colonies. 1,300 for the 13 colonies. It was built on the order of Charles II of England, and now who's the king or whatever, who directed his colonial governors to link Charleston, South Carolina, and Boston, Massachusetts. The section north of New York City, laid out on January 22nd, 1673, became the Upper Boston Post Road. The road was finally completed in 1735. Much of the Post Road is now U.S. Route 1 and U.S. Route 20. And as scripture says, man's days will be shortened to 120 years. So, the King's Highway Historic District in New Jersey covers U.S. Route 206 and New Jersey Route 27 for the 27 Club, connecting Lawrenceville with Kingston through Princeton. In Pennsylvania, much of the route is now U.S. Route 13. There's the 13 again. 13 in the Charo, which is equivalent to death. In Philadelphia, Route 13 becomes Frankfort Avenue. Through Maryland, the King's Highway largely follows U.S. Route 1. From Virginia southward, the modern U.S. Route 17 has many segments that follow the old King's Highway. So just a little bit of history before we get back into the Moabites, Ammonites, and Edomites. The Boston Post Road was a system of mail delivery routes between New York City and Boston that evolved into the first major highways in the United States. Some routes followed trails in use by Native Americans long before Europeans arrived. Some of these important native trails had been used long enough that they were 2 feet below the surrounding woodland. Following a trail known as the Pequot Path, the Upper Post Road was first laid out in 1673, used by post riders to deliver the mail. It was later widened and smoothed so that horse-drawn wagons or stagecoaches could use it. During the 19th century, turnpike companies took over and improved pieces of the road. Large sections of the various routes are still called the King's Highway and Boston Post Road. In 1761, Postmaster General Benjamin Franklin ordered milestones placed along the route from Boston to Saco, Maine, then to Machias as a northern extension of King's Highway, a route which is now marked by the Presumpscot Falls Bridge in Falmouth, Maine, among other landmarks. As part of his duties, Franklin conducted inspections of the roads that were used for delivering mail as settlements along the coast increased. One method of charging for mail service was by mileage, so Franklin invented an odometer to measure mileage more accurately. The King's Highway, as a result, morphed into the Post Road. So this uh, now Herman Moses' 1729 post map describes the route. An account of ye post of ye continent of North America as they were regulated by the Postmasters General of the Post House. The Western Post sets out from Philadelphia every Friday, leaving letters at Burlington in Pert Amboy, and arrives at New York on Sunday night. The distance between Philadelphia and New York being 106 miles. The post goes out eastward every Monday morning from New York and arrives at Seabrook Thursday noon, being 150 miles, where the post from Boston sets out at the same time. The New York Post returning with the eastern letters and the Boston Post with the western. Bags are dropped at New London, Stomington, Rhode Island, and Bristol. The post from Boston to Pisa Cataway, being 7 miles, leaves letters at Ipswich, Salem, Marblehead, and Newbury. There are offices kept at Burlington, Perth Amboy in New Jersey, New London, and Stomington in Connecticut, at Rhode Island, Bristol, Ipswich, Salem, Marblehead, and Newbury. And the three great offices are at Boston, New York, and Philadelphia. Three great offices. So now let's take a look at the mail system as it pertains to the Egyptian King's Highway. So, to mail a letter or package in Egypt, you can utilize Egypt Post, the National Postal Service. You'll need to properly address the mail with the recipient's full name, street address, or P.O. Box city, postal code in Egypt in capital letters. For international mail, ensure you follow the specific address. I want the ancient Egyptian postal service. The first Egyptian postal system. So the ancient Egyptians developed one of the world's first postal systems around 2000 BC, specifically for the pharaohs and other high-ranking officials. This system primarily utilized couriers, initially relying on the Nile River for transportation and later incorporating land routes with horses and mules. The system facilitated the rapid dissemination of royal decrees and other important communications throughout the kingdom. The system emerged with the invention of writing materials like papyrus and the need for efficient communication across the vast Egyptian territory. Pharaoh's exclusive use. Initially, the postal system was a privilege reserved for the pharaohs and their close associates, enabling them to manage their kingdom effectively. Transportation. The Nile River served as a primary route for communication, with couriers transporting messages in boxes. Later, land routes were established utilizing horses and mules for faster travel. Evolution. During the Ptolemaic and Roman periods, the system evolved with the introduction of horse relay stations and even the establishment of the curricus publicus, or a public courier service. Private versus state sponsored. While the state sponsored system was initially for the elite, private individuals also engaged in correspondence. though they relied on their own resources for transport. Impact. The ancient Egyptian postal system played a crucial role in governance, allowing for the swift delivery of royal decrees and ensuring the pharaoh's authority was maintained throughout the kingdom. So, the Nile, we have the European Postal Service, or what was that? England's Postal Service. Now let's see what the Postal Service was like on the Mississippi. First Postal Services on the Mississippi. Since the Mississippi would be compared to the Nile. So the first documented use of steamboats to carry mail on the Mississippi River began in 1812 with the New Orleans, the first commercial steamboat on the lower Mississippi, carrying mail between New Orleans and Natchez. This marked the start of using steamboats for mail delivery on the river, though initially it was done without a formal contract. In 1813, Congress authorized the Postmaster General to contract with steamboat companies for mail transport, solidifying the practice. Okay, so we have the King's Highway. The King's Highway. One second. My brain is braining. Okay. So the salt and the limestone, which is the Moabite land marker, we shall say. Moab, limestone, and salt. So, who are the Moabites once again as a people? What do they look like? What are their characteristics? So the Moabites were a group of people described in the Bible known for their distinct culture and religion, often in conflict with the Israelites. They were a pagan nation, primarily worshiping Chemosh as their chief god, and were known for idolatry and engaging in practices like human sacrifice. Moabites also had a reputation for being proud, powerful, and sometimes hostile towards Israel, particularly in the context of territorial disputes and religious differences. The Moabites were polytheistic, with Shamash as their primary deity. Their worship practices included building temples, making sacrifices, including human sacrifice in times of crisis, and other rituals similar to other Canaanite practices. The Moabites and Israelites had a complex relationship marked by both conflict and periods of interaction. The Bible portrays the Moabites as sometimes hostile, and their proximity to Israel led to territorial disputes and religious tensions. There are also instances of Moabite women marrying Israelite men and being integrated into the Israelite community. The Moabites were known for their distinct cultural practices, including their language, which was closely related to Hebrew, and their own social and political structures. Archaeological findings, such as the Mesha Stele, provide insights into Moabite history and culture. The Moabite kingdom was located east of the Dead Sea, stretching along the Arnon River and into the plains of Moab. The prophets, particularly in the book of Jeremiah, frequently use the Moabites as an example of pride and idolatry, warning against the consequences of such actions. Now, so now we're going to talk about Shamash, the Moabite god. Shamash, Romanized Chemos, was an ancient Semitic deity whose existence is recorded during the Iron Age. Shamash was the supreme deity of the Canaanite state of Moab and the patron god of its population, the Moabites, who in consequence were called the people of Shamash. Shamash is primarily attested from Moabite inscriptions and the Hebrew Bible. The name of Shamash is attested in the Moabite language, KMS. It kind of sounds like Kansas, Mississippi. don't mind. Which was pronounced as Kamos or Camos. It looks like camels, like what do you call it? War camos. The name of Shamash is of yet uncertain origin, and it is unclear whether it was related to the name of the Eblaite deity Kamis, Kamis, or Kami, or the Ugaritic divine name Tizu wa Kamatu, or Kamatu, or an epithet of the Mesopotamian god Nergal, which might have meant bull, Camus. So, as we know, Chicago has a bull for the mascot of the basketball team, basketball. So, according to one hypothesis, which assumes that the names Camis and Kamatu and Kamos and Camis were the same, the first two variants of the name might have been Quattle type, substantial particles of B stem, and the latter two variants might have been Quattle type, verbal adjectives of D stem, both meaning conqueror and subduer, thus being related to the Akkadian terms Kanasu and Kamasu, meaning to submit to an overlord or to a deity, and to bend, as well as to the old South Arabian term HKMS, meaning to crush. Shamash is mentioned in the Hebrew Bible under the name chemos. Something about kemosabe. Whoa, kemosabe. I don't know where that term comes from. Let me look it up. Whoa, kemosabe. Wo Kimosabe is a phrase popularized by the Lone Ranger and Tonto from the classic Western radio and television show. Kimosabe is Tonto's term of address for the Lone Ranger, often interpreted as meaning faithful friend. The phrase Wo Kimosabe would therefore translate to something like stop, my friend, or hold on, trusted friend. The word kemosabe is not a genuine Native American term, though it was presented as such in the Lone Ranger series. It's believed to be a fictional term created for the show. While the show presented kemosabe as meaning faithful friend, there are other interpretations of the words, its origin and meaning. Some sources suggest it could be a variation of the Tiwa word for friend, or a reference to a white man, or even a soggy shrub, depending on the specific dialect. Interesting. Now, where was the Lone Ranger? Where was the Lone Ranger filmed? The Lone Ranger was filmed in several locations across Utah, Arizona, Colorado, New Mexico, and California. Key locations include Monument Valley, Shiprock in New Mexico, and various sites. This shit is crazy. Excuse me. Various sites in Moab, Utah. Bam. Okay. Duly noted. So, whoa, kemosabe. Okay. So the Hebrew form chemos was itself later romanized as chemosh. Also sounds like chemotherapy in translations of the Bible, while the accurate pronunciation of the name of God, reflecting the Moabite pronunciation Chamos, is more accurately recorded in the Septuagint as Chamos and the Vulgate as Chamos. The origin of the Moabite deity Chemosh is unclear, although he might possibly have been the same as the Bronze Age period god Ebla, named Chamis, whose existence has been attested from around circa 2300 BC, thus suggesting that Chemosh might have been an ancient Semitic deity. The significant gap between the attestation of the Eblaite Chamis during the 23rd century BC and that of the Moabite Chemosh in the 9th century BC, with an absence of any reference to either of these deities in Amorite names from the 21st to the 15th centuries BC, nevertheless make this identification between Chamis and Chemosh very uncertain. In the 9th century BC, Shamash was the principal god of the Canaanite kingdom of Moab, whose worship was characteristic of the Moabites. The cult of Chemosh appears to have been limited to the Moabites, and his name does not appear in contemporary ancient North Arabian inscriptions. During this period itself, Chemosh was identified with Astar, who was the Moabite adaptation of the North Arabian god Atur, Attar, himself a form of the Semitic deity of the planet Venus. Atur, in the combined form Astar Chemosh, the astral role of Astar itself is attested by his mention along with the moon god Sagar, Saggar, in the Deir Allah inscription, the subject of which is largely the sun goddess Samas, Samas, thus forming a triad of the sun, moon, and Venus, similarly to the one attested in South Arabia, and suggesting a South Arabian religious influence in Moab. During the 9th century BC, the kingdom of Moab had been subdued by the kingdom of Israel during the rule of the latter states' kings, Omri and Ahab. The 9th century BC Moabite king Mesha, who ascended to the Moabite throne during the reign of Ahab, wrote in inscriptions, including the Mesha stele, that the Israelites had been able to subdue Moab because Shamash was angry with his people, that is, the Moabites. Mesha soon rebelled against Israelite suzerainty and embarked on an expansionist policy against the Israelites, which he carried out as a holy war performed as a ritual to Chemosh. After Mesha had captured the Gadite city of Ataroth, or Ataro, he slaughtered all of its inhabitants as an accomplishment of a vow he had made to Chemosh and to the population of Moab. And he brought the warden of Ataroth, the Gadite chief Uriel, to Kerioth, where Mesha sacrificed him to Chemosh. When, following his capture of Ataroth, Mesha conquered the town of Nebo, he sacrificed the whole Israelite population of the town to Astar Chemosh, likely because of Astar's function as an avenger deity who was invoked in curses against enemies. And he brought all the lambs of the sanctuary of Yahweh at Nebo to the sanctuary of Chemosh, where he sacrificed them to Chemosh. Mesha recorded in his victory stela that he had built a high place dedicated to Chemosh in the citadel of the Moabite capital of Dayton, or Dayton, Ohio, to thank the god for assuring his triumph in his military campaign against the Israelites. Shamash was still worshipped after the Moabite kingdom came to an end, and his name was used as a theophoric element by individuals of Moabite descent living in Egypt and Babylonia. An Aramaic inscription from Al-Karak and dated from the 3rd century BC mentions Shamash. During the periods of Hellenistic and Roman rule in Moab, Shamash was identified with the Greek god of war, Ares, due to which Greco-Roman records called the city of Rabat Moab as Areopolis, Arsopolis, and Arsapolis, all meaning the city of Ares. Legacy in the Bible. Shamash is mentioned in the Hebrew Bible, where he is wrongly called the god of the Ammonites at one point, although he is later correctly referred to as Chemos, Eloah Moab, literally Shemosh, the god of Moab, and later called Moab Sickest Moab, or the abomination of Moab. According to the biblical narrative, the Israelite king Solomon introduced the cults of Astarte, Shamash, and Milcom in East Jerusalem for his foreign concubines, and later Judahite king Josiah later destroyed the high places of these deities during his reform of the cult of his kingdom. In the books of Kings of the Bible, the Moabite king Mesha is alleged to have sacrificed his own son to Shamash on the wall of his city when faced with a difficult situation in war, after which Shamash rewarded Mesha by immediately starting to destroy the kingdom of Israel. The claim that Mesha sacrificed his son to Shamash has so far remained unverifiable and is not attested in any Moabite inscription. The 6th century BC Judahite prophet Jeremiah later announced that Shamash, as well as his priests and his princes, would be exiled. Cult functions. Shamash had a martial role, due to which the Moabite king Mesha called him the subduer of the enemies of Moab, and ascribed to Shamash his own military victories, and due to his identification with Astar, who was the Arab deity of the planet Venus, Shamash appears to also have had an astral aspect. As the patron god of Moab, the Moabites believed that the anger of Shamash against them would result in their subjugation, and his favor would ensure their independence and victory in war. Based on the assumption that his name might have been the same as the epithet Camus of the Mesopotamian god of the underworld Nergal, the Moabite god Chemosh might also have had a chthonic aspect. Temples. The main sanctuary of Shamash in Moab was likely located in the important Moabite city of Keriot, which is presently a site on a high hill, where Iron Age the first to the second period Moabite remains, including potsherds, have been discovered. An inscription of the Moabite king Mesha mentions the existence of a Bet Kamas, or a house or temple of Chemosh. Mesha recorded in his victory stela that he had built a high place dedicated to Chemosh in the citadel of the Moabite capital of Dayton, to thank the god for assuring his triumph in a military campaign against the Israelites. Hence, Chemosh was referred to as Chamos, Shamash, dwelling in the citadel in the inscription. Mesh, Mesh, also claimed to have rebuilt the site of Bet Bamet, whose name means house of high places, and which is called Bamat Baal, high places of Baal, in Israelite texts such as the Hebrew Bible, thus suggesting that a sanctuary with 7 altars existed at this place. This sanctuary's remains have, however, not yet been discovered, and it is unknown whether the cult of Chemosh was performed there. Hypostasis. Chemosh was equated with the Semitic high god El in the personal name Chamos El, meaning Shamash is El. Ashtar Shamash. Shamash was identified with Astar, who was the Moabite adaptation of the North Arabian god Atar himself, a form of the Semitic deity of the planet Venus. Atar in the combined form of Astar Chamos. The astral role of Astar itself is attested by his mention along with the moon god Sagar in the Deir Allah inscription, the subject of which is largely the sun goddess Shamash, and that's Shamash, thus forming a triad of the sun, moon, and Venus, similarly to the one attested in South Arabia and suggesting a South Arabian religious influence in Moab. In earlier scholarship from the late 19th century, Ashtar Chemosh was inaccurately considered to be an independent deity existing separately from Shamash, and was identified as a form of the Canaanite goddess Astarte, although the masculine form of Astar in the god's name shows that Ashtar Shamash was a male deity. Iconography. Shamash was likely the masculine deity represented in the Balua stele, in which he is depicted as handing a scepter to a Moabite king. The masculine figure represented on a Moabite stele from Shihan wearing a shindet and holding a spear might also have been a depiction of Shamash. Shamash might also have been represented in Hellenistic period Moabite coins as an armed figure standing between two torches. Rites. Human sacrifice. The Moabites considered human sacrifice to Shamash to be necessary to obtain the favor of Shamash in critical situations, as attested by those performed by the Moabite king Mosa, Mosa. One form of human sacrifice to Chemosh was performed by Moabite kings to thank him for the accomplishment of a vow made to him in a military context. That is, in exchange of the Moabites' victory in war, the enemy population defeated in the said war was killed in the name of Chemosh. This is attested when Mesha had embarked on a policy of conquest of Israelite territories in the 9th century BC, and he slaughtered all of the inhabitants of the Gadite city of Ataroth as an accomplishment of a vow he had made to Chemosh. Enemy populations defeated in war were also directly sacrificed to Chemosh, such as when, following his capture of Ataroth, Mesha conquered the town of Nebo. He sacrificed the whole Israelite population of the town to Ashtar Shamash, likely because of Ashtar's function as an avenger deity who was invoked in curses against enemies. The Hebrew Bible claims that Mesha sacrificed his own son to Shamash on the wall of his city when faced with a difficult situation in war, after which Shamash rewarded Mesha by immediately starting to destroy the kingdom of Israel. The claim that Mesha sacrificed his son to Shamash has so far remained unverifiable and is not attested in any Moabite inscription. Animal sacrifice. After Mesha conquered Nebo, he brought all the lambs of the sanctuary of Yahweh, the God of his Israelite enemies, at Nebo to the sanctuary of Shamash, where he sacrificed them to Shamash. Moabite kings built sanctuaries for Shamash to thank him once they had obtained his favor, as attested in the victory stela of Mesha, recording that he had built a high place dedicated to Shamash in the citadel of the Moabite capital of Daban to thank the god for assuring his triumph in his military campaign against the Israelites. Okay, so the capital of Ohio is Columbus. Let's see where Dayton, Ohio. Dayton, Ohio to Columbus is 1 hour, 11 minutes driving. 69.6 miles. Turn the 9 upside down. That would be 66.6. Right below that, you will find Lebanon and Cincinnati. How do you put sin twice in the name of the town? Cincinnati. Okay, let us continue. We'll talk about Ohio when we get to that bridge. So, as theophoric elements, the name of Kamash appears as a theophoric element in the name of several Moabite kings, such as Chamos Ayat or Chamos Yatan or Aton, Chamos Nadab, Chamosa Asa, or Chamos Asa, as well as in several Moabite personal names recorded in inscriptions, such as Kamos, Kamos, literally the one of Shamash, Kamos El, meaning Chemosh is El or Chemosh is God, Kamos Chemosh is my light, Kamos Dan, Kamosh is strong or Kamash has given justice, Kamos Hasad, Kamash has shown loyalty to me, Kamos Yihai, Chemosh may live, or O Chemosh, may it stay alive. Chamos Yasu, Chemosh is my salvation. Chamos Muaz, given by Shamash. Chamos Natan, Chemosh has given. Chamos Oz, Shamash is my protection. Chamos Am, Shamash is the divine uncle. Shamash is the divine uncle. Shamash has saved, KMSPLT. Shamash Sadak. Shamash is righteous, or Shamash has given justice. Chamos Sua, or Shamash is my salvation. And Sikas Chamos, or taboo, exclusive property of Chamash. Now we're going to talk about the Native Americans in California. Now, I have read this before, but the way my brain's set up, I can't tell you when or where. So, the Chumash people, that is Chumash. The one from the Hebrew is Chemosh. Now, Chumash are a Native American people of the central and southern coastal regions of California and portions of what is now Kern, San Luis Obispo, Santa Barbara, Ventura, and Los Angeles counties. Now, mind you, what is the name of Cassie, the whole Diddy trial? Her name is Ventura. So it's clearly telling you these people, they are bold in their working. So they want you to know their name. What the Tower of Babel, it said that they needed to make a name for themselves before they were scattered abroad. Okay. So Ventura and Los Angeles, extending from Morro Bay in the north to Malibu in the south to Mount Pinos in the east. Their territory includes 3 of the Channel Islands, Santa Cruz, Santa Rosa, and San Miguel. The smaller island of Anacapa was likely inhabited seasonally due to the lack of a consistent water source. Modern place names with Chumash origins include Malibu, Nipomo, Lompoc, Ojai, Pismo Beach, Point Mugu, Port Hueneme, Piru, Lake Castaic, Satakoy, Simi Valley, and Somis. Archaeological research demonstrates that the Chumash people have deep roots in the Santa Barbara Channel area and lived along the Southern California coast for millennia. History. Prior to European contact, pre-1542, indigenous peoples have lived along the California coast for at least 11,000 years. Sites of the Milling Stone Horizon date from 7000 to 4500 BC and show evidence of a subsistence system focused on the processing of seeds with metates and manos, whatever that is. During that time, people used bipointed bone objects and line to catch fish and began making beads from shells of the marine olive snail, the Calianax biplicata. The name Shumash means bead maker or seashell people, being that they originated near the Santa Barbara coast. The Chumash tribes near the coast benefited most with the close juxtaposition of a variety of marine and terrestrial habitats. Intensive upwelling in coastal waters and intentional burning of the landscape made the Santa Barbara Channel region one of the most resource abundant places on the planet. While droughts were not uncommon in the centuries of the first millennium AD, a population explosion occurred with the coming of the medieval warm period. Marine productivity soared between 950 and 1300 as natural upwelling intensified off the coast. Before the mission period, the Chumash lived in over 150 independent villages, speaking variations of the same language. Much of their culture consisted of basketry, bead manufacturing, and trading, cuisine of local abalone and clam, herbalism, which consisted of using local herbs to produce teas and medical reliefs, rock art, and the scorpion tree. The scorpion tree was significant to the Chumash as shown in its arborglyph, a carving depicting a six-legged creature with a headdress including a crown and two spears. The shamans participated in the carving, which was used in observations of the stars and in part of the Chumash calendar. The Chumash resided between the Santa Ynez Mountains and the California coast, where a bounty of resources could not be found. The tribe lived in an area of three environments: the interior, the coast, and the northern Channel Islands. The interior is composed of the land outside the coast and spanning the wide plains, rivers, and mountains. The coast covers the cliffs, land close to the ocean, and the areas of the ocean from which the Chumash harvested. The northern Channel Islands lie off the coast of the Chumash territory. All of the California coastal interior has a Mediterranean climate due to the incoming ocean winds. The mild temperatures, save for winter, made gathering easy during the cold months. The Chumash harvested what they could and supplemented their diets with stored foods. What villagers gathered and traded during the seasons changed depending on where they resided. With coast populated by masses of species of fish and land densely covered by trees and animals, the Chumash had a diverse array of food. Abundant resources and a winter rarely harsh enough to cause concern meant the tribe lived a sedentary lifestyle in addition to a subsistence existence. Villages in the three aforementioned areas contained remains of sea mammals and indicating that trade networks existed for moving materials throughout the Chumash territory. The Chumash were connected to extensive trade networks reaching into modern-day Arizona, from which pottery and textiles were traded in exchange for shell beads. The emergence of this trade network within the Chumash territory was facilitated by the existence of three distinct Chumash ecological groups, including the island, coastal, and mainland Chumash. Access to distinct resources for these different groups made inter-Chumash trade a large part of life. Villages along the mainland coast emerged as intermediaries between groups. The closer a village was to the ocean, the greater its reliance on maritime resources. Due to advanced canoe designs, coastal and island people could procure fish and aquatic mammals from farther out. Shellfish were a good source of nutrition, relatively easy to find and abundant. Many of the favored varieties grew in tidal zones. Shellfish grew in abundance during winter to early spring. Their proximity to shore made collection easier. Some of the consumed species included mussels, abalone, and a wide array of clams. Abalone sounds like Babylon. Anyway, uh, they were harvested along the central California coast in the pre-contact era. The Chumash and other California Indians also used red abalone shells to make a variety of fish hooks, beads, ornaments, and other artifacts. Ocean animals such as otters and seals were thought to be the primary meal of coastal tribe peoples, but recent evidence shows the aforementioned trade networks exchanged oceanic animals for terrestrial foods from the interior. Any village could acquire fish, but the coastal and island communities specialized in catching not just smaller fish, but also the massive catches such as swordfish. This feat, difficult even for today's technology, was made possible by the Tomo plank canoe. Its design allowed for the capture of deep water fish and it facilitated trade routes between villages. Some researchers believe that Chumash may have been visited by Polynesians between AD 400 and 800, nearly 1,000 years before Christopher Columbus reached the Americas. The Chumash advanced sewn plank canoe design used throughout the Polynesian islands but unknown in North America except by those tribes is cited as the chief evidence for contact. Comparative linguistics may provide evidence as the Chumash word for sewn plank canoe. Tomolo'o may have been derived from Kumula'au, the Polynesian word for the redwood logs used in that construction. However, the language comparison is generally considered tentative. Furthermore, the development of the Chumash plank canoe is fairly well represented in the archaeological record and spans several centuries. The concept is rejected by most archaeologists who work with the Chumash culture, and there is no evidence of a genetic legacy. Before contact with Europeans, coastal Chumash relied less on terrestrial resources than they did on maritime, vice versa for interior Chumash. Regardless, they consumed similar land resources. Like many other tribes, deer were the most important land mammal the Chumash pursued. Deer were consumed in varying amounts across all regions, which cannot be said for other terrestrial animals. Interior Chumash placed greater value on the deer to the extent that they had unique hunting practices for them. Now let's see deer in let's deer in the Bible. So, in the Bible, deer are mentioned primarily in the context of dietary laws, symbolism, and imagery. They are listed as a kosher, clean animal for consumption in Deuteronomy. Deer also symbolize longing for God, as seen in Psalm 42 and 1. and are used to represent grace, sure-footedness, and agility in various passages. Deuteronomy 12 and 15 and 14 and 5 list deer, including the hart and roebuck, as permissible animals to eat. The Israelites were allowed to eat deer meat provided they followed the rules for preparing the meat, such as draining the blood. Hmm. Longing for God. Psalm 42 and 1 uses the image of a deer panting for water to illustrate the soul's deep longing for God. Grace and agility. Deer are known for their grace and agility to move quickly and sure-footedly through various terrains. This is used to represent God's help in navigating life's challenges and escaping enemies. Beauty and love. Proverbs 5 and 19 uses the imagery of a deer to describe the beauty and allure of a wife. Restoration and joy. Isaiah 35 and 6 uses the image of a leaping deer to symbolize the transformation of a desolate land into a place of joy and abundance. Innocence and timidity. Depending on the context, deer can also represent naivety or innocence. Deer were part of the natural landscape of ancient Israel and were familiar to the people. The Hebrew word for deer is ayal, or Ayyal, and its variations. Okay. Deer in Canaan. So deer are found in the Canaan area with sightings in both. Uh, mm, I'm not even looking for this stuff that's popping up. So the Canaan area, according to the U.S., would be Canaan, New Hampshire, and Canaan Valley, West Virginia. In Canaan, New Hampshire, a deer was recently rescued after getting stuck in a fence. In Canaan Valley, West Virginia, deer are a common sight and are even part of the proposed Canaan Valley National Wildlife Refuge. Hmm. All right. So, at Canaanite sites, large amounts of fallow deer bones have been found at early Canaanite cultic sacrificial sites. While domestic animals were more common, wild ungulates like deer and gazelle appear to have been part of their cultic tradition. The findings of deer bones suggest that deer may have played a role in Canaanite religious practices, even if they were not explicitly mentioned as permissible sacrifices in later Israelite writings. Archaeological finds, including burnt animal bones and cultic items like figurines, demonstrate the richness and openness of late Bronze Age Canaanite religion. Symbolic interpretations from related ancient cultures. In the broader ancient Near Eastern context, animals like deer held symbolic importance in the connection to the supernatural, the other world, and transformation. While not directly from Canaanite texts, the Jewish Bible, which has roots in the region, uses deer imagery to symbolize agility, security on heights, and a longing for God. This suggests that the image of the deer might have held similar associations for the Canaanites. Potential associations with Canaanite deities. Although there is no definitive link between deer and specific Canaanite gods in the provided search results, it is plausible that they could have been associated with deities related to nature, hunting, or fertility. For example, deer were associated with Artemis, the Greek goddess of the hunt. The direct evidence of specific symbolism or worship of deer in Canaanite texts is limited in these search results. However, the archaeological evidence suggests their presence at religious sites, hinting at a potential cultural or symbolic importance. Further research into Canaanite religious texts and iconography might shed more light on this topic. Ayal and Ayala sounds like Baal and Baalat. Hmm, just gets more and more interesting. Uh-huh. Okay. Okay. So they dressed as deer and grazed alongside the animals until the hunters were in range to use their arrows. Even Chumash, close to the ocean, pursued deer, though in understandably fewer numbers, and what more meat the villages needed, they acquired from smaller animals such as rabbits and birds. Plant foods composed the rest of Chumash diet, especially acorns, which were the staple food despite the work needed to remove their inherent toxins. What are they called? Tannins? They could be ground into a paste that was easy to eat and store for years. Coast live oak provided the best acorns. Their mush would be served usually unseasoned with meat and or fish. Spanish contact Spanish contact and the mission period 1542 through 1834. You want your headphones? You want your headphones? The Spaniard Juan Cabrillo was the first European to make contact with the coastal Alta Californian tribes in the year 1542. Cabrillo died and was buried on Miguel Island, but his men brought back a diary that contained the names and population counts for many Chumash villages, such as the Mikiw, Mikiw. Spain claimed what is now California from that time forward, but did not return to settle until 1769, when the first Spanish soldiers and missionaries arrived with the double purpose of Christianizing the Native Americans and facilitating Spanish colonization. By the end of 1770, missions of military presidios had been founded at San Diego to the south of Chumash lands and Monterey to their north. With the arrival of the Europeans came a series of unprecedented blows to the Chumash and their traditional lifeways. Anthropologists, historians, and other scholars have long been interested in documenting the collision of cultures that accompanied the European exploration and colonization of the Americas. Spain settled on the territory of the Chumash in 1770. They founded colonies, bringing in missionaries to begin evangelizing Native Americans in the region by forcing Chumash villages into numerous missions springing up along the coast. The Chumash people moved from their villages to the Franciscan missions between 1772 and 1817. Mission San Luis Obispo, established in 1772, the first mission in Chumash speaking lands, as well as the northernmost of the five missions ever constructed in those lands. Next established in 1782 was Mission San Buenaventura on the Pacific coast near the mouth of the Santa Clara River. Mission Santa Barbara, also on the coast and facing out to the Channel Islands, was established in 1786. Mission La Purísima Conception was founded along the inland route from Santa Barbara north to San Luis Obispo in 1789. The final Franciscan mission to be constructed in native Chumash territory was Santa Ynez, founded in 1804 on the Santa Ynez River with a seed population of Chumash people from missions La Purísima and Santa Barbara. To the southeast, Mission San Fernando, founded in 1798 in the land of Takik Shoshonian speakers, also took in large numbers of Chumash speakers from the middle Santa Clara River Valley. While most of the Chumash people joined one mission or another between 1772 and 1806, a significant portion of the native inhabitants of the Channel Islands did not move to the mainland missions until 1816. Radiocarbon dating of artifacts on the northernmost of the Channel Islands, San Clemente Island, suggests that the Chumash people lived without significant contact from Spanish settlers and missionaries until the 1870s. This island shows a clear lack This island shows a clear lack of Spanish influence on its archaeology up until this point. Because of its remoteness, it was perhaps the last Chumash area to be colonized. The Mexican era of 1834 through 1848. Mexico seized control of the missions in 1834. Tribes people either fled into the interior, attempted farming for themselves, and were driven off the land, or were enslaved by the new administrators. Many found highly exploitative work on large Mexican ranches. After 1849, most Chumash land was lost due to theft by Americans and a declining population due to the effects of violence and disease. The remaining Chumash began to lose their cohesive identity. In 1855, a small piece of land, 120 acres, was set aside for just over 100 remaining Chumash Indians near Santa Ynez Mission. This land ultimately became the only Chumash reservation, although Chumash individuals and families also continued to live throughout their former territory in Southern California. Today, the Santa Ynez Band lives at and near Santa Ynez. The Chumash population was between roughly 10,000 and 18,000 in the late 18th century. In 1990, 213 Indians lived on the Santa Ynez Reservation. American era, 1848 to the present. The Chumash Reservation, established in 1901, encompasses 127 acres. No native Chumash speak their own language since Mary Yee. The last Barbareño speaker died in 1965. Today, the Chumash are estimated to have a population of 5,000 members. Many current members can trace their ancestors to the 5 islands of Channel Islands National Park. Beginning in the 1970s, Neo-Chumash arose, tracing their lineage nearly completely from the descendants of Spanish colonists to the domain of the initial Chumash people. They promote traditions of the Chumash and are recognized locally. Their cultural assumption has been criticized by some but is supported by others. The first modern tamale was built and launched in 1976 as a result of a joint venture between Quabajai Chumash of the Coastal Band of the Chumash Nation and the Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History. Its name is Helek or Zelex, Xelex, the Chumash word for falcon. The Brotherhood of the Tamil was revived, and her crew paddled and circumnavigated around the Santa Barbara Channel Islands on a 10-day journey, stopping on 3 of the islands. The second Tamal, the El Woon or Swordfish, was launched in 1997. On September 9, 2001, the first crossing in the Chumash Tamal from the mainland to Channel Islands was sponsored by the Chumash Maritime Association and the Barbareño Chumash Council. Several Chumash bands and descendants gathered on the island of Limu, Limuw, the Chumash name for Santa Cruz Island, to witness the El Woon being paddled from the mainland to Santa Cruz Island. The journey was documented in the short film Return to Limuw, produced by the Ocean Channel for the Chumash Maritime Association. Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary, and the Santa Barbara Maritime Museum. The Channel crossings have become a yearly event hosted by the Barbaño Chumash Council. The Santa Ynez Band of Chumash is federally recognized Chumash tribe. They have the Santa Ynez Reservation located in Santa Barbara County near Santa Ynez. Chumash people are also enrolled in the Tajan Indian Tribe of California. In addition to the Santa Ynez Band, the Coastal Band of the Chumash Nation and the Barbaño Ventureño Band of Mission Indians are attempting to gain federal recognition. Other Chumash tribal groups include the Northern Chumash Tribal Council, descendants from the San Luis Obispo area, and the Barbaño Chumash Council, descendants from the greater Santa Barbara area. The publication of the first Chumash dictionary took place in April 2008, 600 pages long and containing 4,000 entries. The Samala English Dictionary includes more than 2,000 illustrations. The documentary film Six Generations, A Chumash Family History, features Mary Yee, the last speaker of the Barbaño Chumash language. In December 2010, the Food Bank of Santa Barbara County was the recipient of a $10,000 grant from the Santa Ynez Band of Chumash Indians Foundation to support expansion of the Produce Initiative. The Produce Initiative puts an emphasis on supplying fruits and vegetables to 264 local nonprofits and food programs. The food bank distributes produce free of charge to member agencies to encourage healthy eating. Expanding produce accessibility to children is important to the food bank and the newly operating Kids' Farmers Market program. An extension of the Produce Initiative achieves that goal. The program trains volunteers to teach kids in after school programs, nutrition education, and hands on cooking instructions. This program currently operates at 12 sites countrywide, including the Santa Ynez Valley. After the children cook and eat a healthy meal, they get to take home a bag full of fresh produce where they can help feed and cook for the whole family. Obesity in children is a major health problem prevalent among Native Americans, also prevalent among Egyptians. To promote sustainable agriculture and healthy diets, the Santa Ynez Band of Chumash Environmental Office and Education Department's after school program planted a community garden which provides vegetables to the Elders Council beginning in 2013. The Santa Ynez Valley Fruit and Vegetable Rescue, also known as Veggie Rescue, is another effort to improve food sourcing for the Santa Ynez. The worldviews and cosmology. Chumash worldview is centered on the belief that considers all things to be in varying measure alive, intelligent, dangerous, and sacred. According to Thomas Blackburn in December's Child, a book of Chumash oral narratives published in 1980, the Chumash do not have a creation story like Tangua, Abjakaman, Quechnajukum, and other Takik-speaking peoples. Rather, as summarized by Susan Suntree, they assume that the universe, with its three, or in some versions five, layers, has always been here. Human beings occupy the middle region, which rests upon two giant snakes. Chronological time is unimportant, though the past is divided into two sections: the universal flood that caused the first people to become the natural world, and thereafter the creation of human beings, the arrival of the Europeans, and the devastating consequences that followed. The middle region, sometimes referred to as Antap, where humans and spirits of this world live and where shamans could travel in vision quest, is interconnected with the lower world, Koyan Ashuk, through the springs and marsh areas, as is connected to the upper world through the mountains. In the lower world lives snakes, frogs, and salamanders. Hmm. Hmm. The world trembles or has earthquakes when the snakes which support the world rise. Water creatures are also in contact with the powers of the lower world and were often depicted in rock art, perhaps to bring more water to the Chamash or to appease underworld spirits at times of hunger or disease. Itiashap is the home of the first people. Alape is the upper world in Chumash cosmology, where the sky people lived, who play an important role in the health of the people. Principal figures of the sky world include the sun, the moon, lizard, sky coyote, and eagle. The sun is the source of life and is also a source of disease and death. The sky coyote, also known as the great coyote of the sky or Schnillimum, Newman is considered to be a protector and, according to Insigno Chumash lore, looks out for the welfare of all in the world below him. During the creation of mankind, the sky coyote was present among the other important cosmological figures. According to John M. Anderson in his work, Chumash Demonology, the eagle, also known as Slo, SLO apostrophe W, represents the ruler of Polaris. The eagle also is the force that maintains momentum and order among the stars so that they do not fall down on and destroy Earth. Cosmology and astronomy. The Chumash cosmology is also centered around astronomy. Rock art and arborglyphs that have been found within Chumash sites are thought to have depicted Polaris, the North Star, and Ursa Major, the Big Dipper. Specialist Rex St. Ong, John R. Johnson, and Joseph R. Talibon argues in their article Archaeoastronomical Implications of a Northern Chumash Arborglyph that these two astrological entities were paramount to the Chumash belief system as well as their perception of time. It is believed that the Chumash used these constellations to determine what time of the year it was, depending on the position of Ursa Major around Polaris. Chumash bands. One Chumash band, the Santa Ynez Band of Chumash Mission Indians of the Santa Ynez Reservation, is a federally recognized tribe, and other Chumash people are enrolled in the federally recognized Tijan Indian tribe. There are 14 bands of Chumash Indians. Barbaño Chumash affiliated with the Tenayan missions and the Kashwa reservations. Coastal Band of the Chumash Nation, their historical territory north of Los Angeles includes parts of the coastal counties of Santa Barbara, San Luis Obispo, Kern, and Ventura. The Coastal Band of the Chumash Nation applied for recognition in 1981. Cuyama Chumash from the Cuyama Valley, Island Chumash from the Channel Islands, Cagasmuas Chumash from the southwesternmost region of the ancestral Chumash land. Their historical lands are now part of Vandenberg Space Force Base. Los Angeles Chumash formed when members of the historic Malibu, Tijan, and Ventura bands were relocated in the 19th century. Malibu Chumash from the coast of Malibu. Descendants of this band can now be found among the Ventura, Coastal, Tijan, and San Fernando Valley bands. Monterey Chumash from the Monterey Peninsula, Samala or Santa Ynez Chumash. The Santa Ynez Chumash people in 2012 went to federal court to regain more land. The Bureau of Indian Affairs approved the request. The land was to go toward tribal housing and a Chumash museum and cultural center. Protesters and anti-tribal groups have spent approximately $2 million to disrupt or stop the land acquisition. San Fernando Valley Chumash once laborers at the Mission San Fernando Rey de España. They intermarried other tribes who also worked at the mission. Yak Tipu, Tichu Yak, Tilhini, Northern Chumash, homelands from coastal Avila Beach to Morro Bay. They are the northwesternmost Chumash people located in San Luis Obispo County. Tikuya Chumash, most of this band of Chumash tribe were probably Cagasmuas. This band was established as an anti-colonial group who took residence in the Tikuya Canyon along with the Tijan Chumash. Tijan Chumash Part of the Kern County Chumash Council, Tejan is the Spanish word for badger, and its name was given to the Tejan Rancheria. Ventura Chumash lives in the traditional Chuman domain of the Owl clan. Population. Estimates for the pre-contact populations of most Native American groups in California have varied substantially. The anthropologist Alfred L. Kroeber thought the 1770 population of the Chumash might have been about 10,000. Alan K. Brown concluded that the population was about 15,000. Sherburne F. Cook at various times estimated the aboriginal Chumash as 8,000 to 13,650, 20,400, or 18,500. Some scholars have suggested the Chumash population may have declined substantially during a protohistoric period, 1542 through 1769, when intermittent contacts with the crews of Spanish ships, including those of Juan Rodriguez Cabrillo's expedition, who wintered in the Santa Barbara Channel in AD 1542 through 43, brought disease and death. The Chumash appear to have been thriving in the late 18th century when Spaniards first began actively colonizing the California coast. Whether the deaths began earlier with the contacts with ships, crews, or later with the construction of several Spanish missions at Ventura, Santa Barbara, Lompoc, Santa Ynez, and San Luis Obispo, the Chumash were eventually devastated by the California genocide carried out when the United States took over the territory. By 1900, their numbers had declined to just 200, while current estimates of Chumash people today range from 2,000 to 5,000. The demographics of traditional Chumash society are quite complex. One aspect of interest is the Aki, AQI, gender of the Chumash. Aki was a third Chumash gender defined by biological males that performed work and wore clothing traditionally of women. The Aki gender appears to be closely tied to non procreative sexual activity, such as homosexuality. Archaeological investigation of mortuary practices has provided evidence for this. Languages. Several related languages under the name Chumash from Umas, UMAS, meaning Santa Cruz Islander, were spoken. No native speakers remain, although the dialects are well documented in the unpublished field notes of linguist John Peabody Harrington. Especially well documented are the Barbeño, Inseño, Ventureño, and Obispeño languages within the Chumashan language family, which is a language isolate. In 2010, the Smuick Chumash Language School was established at Wishtoyo's Chumash Village and remained active until 2012. The Language Reclamation Program in 2010 was initially run by Elder Johnny Moreno and his niece Deborah Sanchez. The language classes were revitalized in 2014 at American Indian Health and Services in Santa Barbara and in Santa Paula in 2016. Sanchez was the sole instructor. Classes then moved online once the COVID pandemic arrived. The traditional name for Encino is Samala, and the Chumash name for the Barbeño people is Smuick. Culture. The Chumash were hunter-gatherers and were adept at fishing at the time of Spanish colonization. They are one of the relatively few New World peoples who regularly navigated the ocean. Another was the Tongva, a neighboring tribe to the south. Some settlements built a plank boat, or Tomol, Tomol, which facilitated the distribution of goods and could be used for whaling. Basketry. Anthropologists have long collected Chumash baskets. Two of the largest two of the largest collections are at the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C., and the Musée del Homme Museum of Mankind in Paris. The Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History is believed to have the largest collection of Chumash baskets. Bead manufacture and trading. The Chumash of the Northern Channel Islands were at the center of an intense regional trade network. Beads made from Kalinax shells were manufactured on the Channel Islands and used as a form of currency by by the Chumash. Shell beads were not just a form of currency, they also played a vital role in the Chumash social system. The beads exchanges helped people build social networks and accumulated wealth outside of food. This allowed the Chumash people to minimize the risk of food shortages in their tribe and were able to fall back on durable beads and their existing friends in other communities. Chumash chiefs and elite members were responsible with the redistribution of the shell beads, subsistence goods, and other items. These shell beads were traded to neighboring groups and have been found throughout Alta California. Some items that were traded by the Chumash from the island to the Chumash mainland tribes included shell beads, digging stick weights or stone rings, and steatite lolas or stone bowls, which originates mainly from Santa Catalina Island. The mainland tribes would in turn export seeds, acorns, bows and arrows, fur, skin, roots, and baskets to the island. There was also trade from the mainland and inland areas whose items consisted of fish and beads. The interior citizens would trade fish, game, seeds, fruit, and I thought that said foreskin. It says fox skin shawls to the coast. Fernando Librado, Chumash elder, mentions that all the trade transactions took place on the mainland due to the location, since it was between the island and the interior. Over the course of the late prehistory, millions of shell beads were manufactured and traded from Santa Cruz Island. It has been suggested that exclusive control over stone quarries mhm, used to manufacture the drills needed in bead production could have played a role in the development of social complexity in Chumash society. The bead making industry involved two distinct craft specializations: the production of tools used to make beads and the actual manufacturing of the beads themselves. Central to this industry was shirt, a hard, fine grained sedimentary rock. The Chumash crafted small flakes of shirt into microblades, which were essential for their bead production. These microblades were then used to create drills, the tools necessary for making holes in the shells, transforming them into beads. Thus, shirt microlithic tools played a crucial role in the bead making process. The regional diversity present within the Chumash territory spawned an intricate trade system connecting the island, coastal, and mainland groups. The villages of Zaxas and Mugu emerged as the most important trade hubs for the Chumash people. Their positioning relative to coastal and mainland trade routes and resources made these villages particularly powerful within the Chumash trade ecosystem. Cuisine, foodways, and subsistence. Foods historically consumed by the Chumash include several marine species, such as black abalone, the Pacific little-neck clam, red abalone, the bent-nosed clam, Austria oysters, angular unicorn snails, and the butternut clam. Acorns, an important plant food, were ground up and cooked into a soup. They also made flour from the dried fruits of the laurel sumac. Highly prized seafood, such as swordfish, were caught through the use of plank canoes and were likely shared by chiefs during communal feasts. Feasts are a ritual activity of communal consumption of large quantities of food and drinks, along with dances, music, and singing. They played a large role in political and social relations for the Chumash people. The feast would be prepared over many days, mostly by women, and would coincide with major events such as childbirth, marriages, and chiefs' birthdays. There are accounts of feasts being held for European expeditions passing through Chumash territories. During the time of Spanish colonialism, some diets of the Chumash people living on mission sites shifted to include European plants and animals. Evidence has been found that more sheep and cattle were consumed during the 19th century. Traditional hunting and fishing practices were still maintained alongside the addition of European livestock. There is evidence to suggest that a seafaring fishing economy in the Channel Islands has been around for at least 12,000 years. This can be seen through various types of fishing projectile points, as well as animal remains such as seal, shellfish, and fish, all found at sites across the islands by archaeologists and researchers. Coastal people of California have been maintaining their food practices in various ways for a very long time. Herbalism. Herbs used in traditional Chumash medicine include thick-leaved yerba santa, used to keep airways open for proper breathing; laurel sumac, the root bark of which was used to make a herbal tea for treating dysentery; and black sage, the leaves and stems were made into a strong sun tea. This was rubbed on the painful area or used to soak one's feet. The plant contains diterpenoids such as ethiopenone and ursolic acid, which are known pain relievers. The Chumash formerly practiced an initiation rite involving the use of sacred datura, momoi in their language. When a boy was 8 years old, his mother would give him a preparation of it to drink. This was supposed to be a spiritual challenge to help him develop the spiritual well being required to become a man. Not all of the boys survived the poison. Rock art. Remains of a developed Chumash culture, including rock paintings, apparently depicting the Chumash cosmology, such as Chumash Painted Cave State Historic Park, can still be seen. Scorpion tree. The centuries old oak tree in California is considered to have a Chumash arboglyph, a carving of a six what six carved by cowboys. It was visited in 2007 by paleontologist Rex St. Ong, who identified the 3-foot carving as being of Chumash origin and related to other Chumash cave paintings in California. Further studies have led St. Ong to believe these are not simply the work of Chumash, but by Chumash shamans who were conscious observers of the stars and use these carvings to calibrate the Chumash calendar. Okay. Wow. Santa Rosa Island cave paintings in Jones Cave. Fraser Mountain. Former burial ground. Southwest Museum in Highland Park. Fraser Mountain. Okay, so that was Shamash, the Kimash, the Chumash people, Chumash, Chumash, Indians from California. We are comparing them to the Chemosh people of the Bible, the Moabites, who were the incestuous children of Lot and his daughters. Okay, so we got that. I'm going to take a break and look through my notes, and we'll be back for another session. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you guys again for watching. Peace, love, and hair grease.